good to see you. And
see you, Klaus. Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, likewise. And it's good to be back and doing another one of these podcasts. There's a whole bunch of things that I think we should be talking about of course, to make people aware of the various technical things that are going on around us as far as our threats to our freedom is concerned, especially on the technological side. And I know you had some thoughts, Jeff, first on the issue of digital IDs, which is a huge issue in the UK. And by the way, I also want to ask you, why do you think this is specifically in the UK and not everywhere else? I would think the EU would also want to do it, but it's a separate question. But please update us on what your observations are.
Well, yeah, there was a flurry of activity related to digital ID in the UK, and a big protest, in fact, was organised just before Christmas. By a number of groups, but this was largely because Keir Starmer rolled out the idea of mandatory ID in order to be able to prove your right to work in the United Kingdom.
Yes.
Now, obviously, this would be a big deal, because in proving your right to work, for example, if you are an immigrant without papers, means that, of course, the entire population of the United Kingdom would be coerced into having to provide digital identity in order to be able to work. But this, in my view, was a bit of a straw man, because it was clear that they had no intention of actually implementing this. And in fact, the Labour government in the UK has now done a U-turn, saying that it's not going to be mandatory any longer, and will be particularly applied to people who maybe have immigrated or asylum seekers, for example, who claim the right to work when they're in the UK. However, of course, many of us have seen that digital ID essentially is in train in the United Kingdom, as it is in the European Union, as it is in the United States. But they tend to use certain arguments in order to justify the rollout of digital ID. And often the justification relates to illegal immigration. You know, you have to be able to prove that you are a bona fide in order to be able to work. And they're using the same argument in the United States. But behind the scenes, in terms of the civil service administration in the European Union, in the United States, and indeed in the United Kingdom, all of the wheels are cranking to create digital ID by default. Yes. Because they're doing things like integrating data silos, as you know. So if you've got various government departments that hold bits of personal data, yes, and they're integrating all of this. The other interesting thing in relation to the United Kingdom is after the UK achieved Brexit, it was hinted by a number of government ministers that the UK may well scrap GDPR. Now, ironically, even though I'm not a fan of the European Union, I do think the GDPR does give individuals certain rights. For example, the right to be forgotten. But the UK is getting perilously close to the stage where it's going to have to say, we're going to scrap GDPR. And I think a lot of the processes related to digital ID in the background are working towards that end game, because what they're doing is essentially joining everything up. And just one final point on this,
yes,
is that they have implemented mandatory digital ID already in the UK for company directors. So company directors have to now verify who they are, and they're using verification procedures that are akin to the type of verification that's undertaken in communist China. For example, they now require facial recognition for company directors. So you have to actually, to verify, if you want to verify in person, you have to go in, for example, to a post office and have your photograph taken using a digital camera. And that is uploaded as a biometric into your file at Companies House, which is the company's data registration system.
Yes.
And all of the other processes, if you decide not to, you want to do it in person, you have to go through that process. But even if you want to do it online, why would you want to? But you have to go through a process such as a single government login process, and you have to hold a government wallet. So in other words, they're centralizing the process of registration of company directors as the sort of beta test for a rollout of digital ID right across the United Kingdom. And this is mirroring a lot of the processes that are happening in the United States and the European Union. And they're pretty much all being mandated by organizations like Oracle, which, as we know, is all over all Western governments and is a spin-out organization from the CIA. So digital ID is happening, but they create these straw men to create protest groups and so on, who then claim that they've won when they patently haven't. It's all happening behind the scenes. And just one plug, there's a guy called Ian Davis who's very active in exposing these sort of moves towards technocracy, and he's just written a book, and previously worked with Whitney Webb and her team as well. So he's very good one to follow on social media.
That's great. So in other words, there were some people that claimed victory in that Keir Starmer had, in part, at least for now, backed it down. But what you're saying, it's not really a victory at all. It's probably just a delay because it's going to happen anyway. I mean, is that
absolutely?
Yeah,
and you've seen the creation of organizations whose sole purpose pretty much is the creation of digital ID processes in the UK. Yeah. We're going back about 14 years ago to the creation of an organization called the Government Digital Service. And the Government Digital Service in the UK was aped. It was copied by the US administration. And in fact, a number of GDS personnel went to the United States to set up the equivalent organization in the US, and that organization morphed into Doge. In fact, it was taken over by Doge when Musk assumed his role of head of Doge. So there is no question that these processes and systems and databases and centralization processes are happening apace across the Western world. And they're all about mass-scale centralized surveillance.
Yeah, I have no doubt about that. And as an individual, I think we would have to ask ourselves the question. I mean, I can see how the state apparatus for surveillance and all of that, as we so often have discussed, see a huge benefits of this. But for the individual, what is the benefit? There is no benefit, and over whatever means of identification you already have, it's purely to the state's benefit. I mean, I know they go out and say, well, we have to protect against this and that and the other fraud and whatever, but I mean, these are minor things, right? I think that have not. I mean, it's not like there's a huge trend, as far as I know, in people pretending to be somebody else, as far as I know. Right?
No, and I don't think they try to give the impression that the purpose of this is to protect individuals from data theft or anything. The purpose is primarily centralized and centrally driven. In other words, it's about Big Brother being able to manage the populace. And they're able to manage the populace in a whole series of different ways. I don't know if you saw. I know one of your hobby horses is electric cars.
Yes, we're going to talk about that in a second.
Yeah. But one of the recent phenomena happening on social media is the outing of the German government's plan to suspend the ability of car owners, electric car owners, to be able to avail of some of the functionality in the cars. For example, you can, if you have an electric car, switch it on 10 minutes before you want to take your journey. If it's frozen solid, it's a big issue for you and us in Northern Europe. So you can, as a car owner, switch on your Toyota or your Lexus and warm it up before driving off on your journey. The German government has just banned this. They have insisted that Toyota and Lexus, obviously the same company, disable this functionality in their electric cars so that people can't run their engines for 10 minutes longer than they should be.
This is madness, and I have a few more things to say about that. It's complete madness, and it's part of the same paradigm. that's tied
Absolutely.
into the whole entire electric vehicle and associated infrastructure that they're pushing us to move over to. It's one of the reasons why I actually very strongly dislike electric vehicles, because it represents to me a form of state control. And when I say that, people call me a conspiracy theorist, but I mean, some of these things are now happening. I mean, exactly as the example you gave. But just before we go in that direction, I wanted to say the right to be forgotten is excellent in GDPR, right? Is excellent.
Absolutely.
But I really would like the right to be forgotten by the state, and such a thing does not exist. I've actually had discussions with certain state departments here in Denmark that keep sending me stuff, and I say, I'm not interested in the stuff that you send me. I find it oppressive and I don't want to receive it. Can you please take me off your mailing list? And it's not possible. I said, well, according to GDPR, I should be able to tell you that, and you should take me off. But as far as state activities go, it's not the same thing. They can do anything they want to you, but of course the other doesn't apply, and we have to respect as companies and individuals, whatever, all these GDPR, which, by the way, I think are fine, but it's not reciprocal, which I think is a disgrace. I mean, ideally, we should be able to opt out of the state if we don't want to be part of it. Really, ultimately, that's our choice. We don't want to be known by the state. We shouldn't be known by the state. I'm an individual free person, and I have a right to be here. I'm born here because that's my natural right. And they don't have no natural right to say you have to register here. I mean, ultimately, as a libertarian, that's what I believe in. But I mean, these are
and it was the case when GDPR was implemented and obviously turned into national laws. You know,
yes.
And obviously, the national laws pretty much aped GDPR in terms of just about every word was taken from the regulation, and in terms of the implementation of national laws. And this included the right to be forgotten on certain state databases. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you were a criminal and had a criminal conviction, you didn't have the right, therefore, and overtly stated this, that you didn't have the right to be forgotten if you were a criminal. It had to be retained on your file. However, you know, things like vaccination status.
Yes.
Why should anyone want their vaccination status known? What about the Hippocratic Oath? What about the fact that your medical history is your information and shouldn't be divulged in the public? Yeah. So therefore, the act of coercing people through digital passports, COVID passports and vaccination status passports, was a breach of GDPR de facto. And yet that was just, and that's the nature of a government these days. They just choose to ignore law. They choose to ignore good law that is defined for the rights of the individual. And that's why Trump can just march into Venezuela and kidnap another leader of another jurisdiction, which is a breach of international law.
Absolutely.
So it's astonishing how they just run roughshod over individual human rights.
Yeah, absolutely. They don't care the least bit, and they don't even want to discuss it. They just do whatever they want. And it's really falling apart very, very quickly now, as you said, also with the Venezuela situation, which, you know, I've never been a huge Trump supporter. When he first came into office, I thought a lot of the things that he initially did with Doge, etc., I was frankly very excited about, because I thought, okay, maybe they're really going to clean up this mess now. But then since then, he's been supporting a lot of wars. I'm very strongly against anything that goes on outside of the individual country, just like, you know, this country supports the Ukraine war. I'm very much against that, and I don't think America should waltz into countries and forcefully install new governments, anything like that. I think it's madness, and it's against any reasonable moral thinking on leaving other people to do what they want to do and not interfering, right?
Yeah,
there's all of that.
I think though the method by which he was elected as well, you know, indicated that they needed a kind of clamorous, electoral mandate, you know, to say this is our guy. This guy is for freedom and for making America great again, and he's nationalistic and he's full of pride. But what in fact has turned out to be the case is that he just simply replaced globalism with technocracy and assembled behind the scenes. And of course, for us, I think this is what motivated you and I to get it to speak out, because as technologists, as people who are involved in technology, we felt that technology was enabling for the individual. We didn't expect technology to be hijacked in the same way as Bitcoin was hijacked. We didn't expect those technologies to be hijacked by people who claimed to be freedom seekers and making America great again and raising up the less advantaged in society. And there was an interesting report published today which indicated that in the United States, the consumer boom, the growth, all of the growth is being sustained by about the top 10% of American society, people who have availed of asset growth. And 80% of American society isn't participating. They've maxed out their credit cards. They have they're literally living a hand-to-mouth existence. They can't afford their energy bills. They can't even afford to buy eggs.
No, exactly.
Eggs have become unaffordable. What state of crazy is this, and what form of greatness is this?
No, it's madness, and it has to do with financialization of everything, so that people with assets actually can make them grow. But the ones with not so many assets don't have anything except for a devaluing dollar wage, basically, which is worth less and less. And it's a terrible thing. I have a few things to say about that after. I wanted to bring up this story, which came across to me on LinkedIn. There was a post about this. So there's the Chinese kill switch. The reason why I bring it up is because of the entire issue of electric vehicles. And in this case, it's buses, right? And I'm not even so much concerned that the Chinese would shut off all the buses in a particular country. Maybe, I don't think they would. I don't know what interest they would have in that. But I think if, the more we electrify and turn our vehicles into software that's controlled from somewhere, right? The more the state will want to get involved in, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we could switch off all the electric vehicles in case of a pandemic, right? So that people couldn't go anywhere. And, I proposed this to a few people a few months ago and said, one of the reasons that I don't like electric vehicles is for this reason. And because the state will want to control them. And I know for a fact they will want to control them. It's much harder for a state to control a regular old petrol car because it's just harder to do, and there's no infrastructure to do it really. And somebody said, well, they can they can shut down all the gas stations. Yes, but they actually don't want to be heavy-handed. What they want to do is the frog in the pot story. They want us to sort of gradually accept the infrastructure to do this, the new vehicles to do this, and then piece by piece, legislation will be put in place just in case we have another pandemic where we need to lock everybody down. And it'll probably not happen, so don't worry about it. But just in case, we're putting these kill switches in every single electric vehicle, and it's now law, and we have to do it because it's part of the EU or whatever. So this is a real thing, and I'm seriously concerned about it. I know another reason why I really dislike EVs. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, it's another instance of the offer that they make to us. They say, everything is going to be wonderfully convenient and sort of clean and tidy, and with like little blue flashing and electric lights. Yeah. And electric vehicles are being made to look more and more sexy. They are being made to look like something that you should desire, that is an improvement on the previous technology. In my view, we discussed this in our last chat, the internal combustion engine represents freedom for me. Certainly not the internet. It was that ability to be able to drive wherever the hell you wanted, and you could fill up pretty much anywhere as well. It was the ultimate process of decentralization. It gave power to the individual, the internal combustion engine. But of course, these things are centralized by definition. You pile onto these electric buses. In the United States, they're supposedly autonomous. They drive themselves. And even, taxis in San Francisco. Well, they're not truly autonomous, of course, because they can only go essentially on rails. unspecified roads, which are earmarked purely for electric vehicles.
Mm.
But of course, that's the antithesis of freedom. That's the state or some centralized body or transport body telling you where you can go to and whether indeed you can avail of the transportation system in the first place. And of course, this is manna from authoritarian war pigs who essentially are telling us how to live our lives, because they, as you say here, they can pull the switch and say, no, you're not going to travel. You're not going to go anywhere. You're going to stay at home and you're going to take the vaccines and you're going to be subservient.
So the sad thing about I totally agree with you, by the way, Jeff, but the sad thing about it is that when people like us who are not 24 years old, right, say things like this, it kind of sounds like we're against progress and technology, which is not the case at all. But it could very easily be misconstrued in that sense. I'm not actually, in principle, against people trying out electric vehicles because they're interesting technology and they're kind of gadgety and they can do stuff maybe that some other regular cars can't do and whatever. And all that's fine. What I don't want is have them shoved down my throat as the only option, right? And have them controlled by somebody else. That's what I don't want. But it kind of sounds like we're little old Luddites, protesting against everything that's going on in the world. And it's not the case at all. We're just trying to sort out what's good for humanity and what probably isn't, right? I mean, I hope you agree with that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And of course, it's not, we have had an electrified rail system for over 100 years. In the case of the London Tube, I think it was before the turn of it was in the 19th century when they first started introducing electrification in the London Tube network. So this is not marvelous new technology. As a kid, I used to play with Skilextrix cars, which were atrocious. You pressed the throttle button and they flew off the track. It's pretty depressing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's fun.
So actually, and of course, these buses are being powered by electric power stations, which are probably run by gas. It's nonsense. It's all nonsense. It's a bit like those video memes that you see on Twitter, where they show a diesel powered generator charging an electric car. This is not new technology. It is centralized technology, and it's all designed to allow authoritarians to tell us how we should live.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the one thing that Tesla initially did very well at the time when I thought Tesla was pretty much a gadget, because I didn't want to buy one, but I kind of thought it was interesting, right, to sit in one and experience one and see all the software and whatnot. But the one thing they did very well, and they've always done very well, apart from the marketing and the cultish following of Elon Musk and all that, is actually they do very well in all the automation in managing the power consumption and all of that, and all these other intelligent features of the car and so. And all that's fine. In principle, I don't dispute that. And I thought it would be cool to have that as an option on the car, on the automotive market, and whomever likes that can get that. And that's all fine. It's the next step. It's shoving these things down our throat that I absolutely abhor and that I will not participate in. And I told my Porsche mechanic, independent Porsche mechanic here, he's got a great little shop, said, I will be the last person in Denmark to buy an electric vehicle. Said, no, you will not. I will be the last. But all my neighbors on the street have electric vehicles also because the taxation on them is now much, much lower. But I actually think what's going to happen is that they will be shocked when they try to resell their cars, because nobody knows exactly what the value of one of these things is. Once they get above 100,000 kilometers, their value might very well be zero because the technology has moved on. Who's going to want to buy an old-ish electric vehicle? I don't know that there's much of a market for that. And in the US, of course, you see that the market for used electric vehicles has been plummeting, right? So there's all kinds of issues, and I think it's going to be a rude awakening.
I think Denmark is about the only. Don't quote me on this, but I saw some stats recently related to Tesla sales, and they're slumping in just about every Western European market, with the exception, I believe, of Denmark, where the sales have been going up. But it's just about the only nation. that has seen that growth. But of course, in the UK, where there is no ban on the import of electric vehicles from China, unlike the United States, where there effectively is, sales of Chinese vehicles have pretty much made up that shortfall. But of course, these things are being heavily subsidized by the government. When those subs here, and by the way, that applies to just about all of the so-called renewable energy companies. When the subsidies are pulled, these companies will be exposed for what they are. They're highly polluting peddlers of technology, which actually is much, much worse than the technology that came before.
It is a lot worse than what we had before. And it's interesting, right? Because I think most people have a natural tendency to think that technology moves in the direction of more utility, more a use for humanity, and it is always in a positive direction. But that's not the case at all, because you can definitely go backwards technologically. And I think this is a form of regression. All this EV and a lot of the so-called green technology out there is a form of going backwards. And it's only possible through subsidization. Nobody on a free market would want these things, in my opinion. Or they might try them for a while, and it would be a fad, and then they would go back to their usual thing once they found out it's not practical, and I don't really like it anyway. Which has actually happened for a number of people in more free markets than this, right? So just because it's new and it's technical and it's fancy doesn't mean it's of any it's progress, right? It does not mean that, but most people think that. Right?
No, indeed, and even the types of businesses and services that are sustained by technology often provide services that are patently worse than what came before. I think the obvious example of that is low-cost airlines.
Yes.
And many of these low-cost airlines, and I would highlight Ryanair in particular, roll out technologies that really go against personal liberty. And of course, they use the argument, well, no, obviously we're emancipating. We provide low-cost travel to the masses. Yes, but what you do then is treat people like dirt. You put in surveillance systems. You try to put in facial recognition systems. You have an unhealthy relationship with government, but you try to make it appear that you're champions for personal freedom.
I totally agree with that. They really do treat you like crap. They have no respect for anyone. They treat everybody, by the way, equally badly. There is no class that you can elevate yourself to where you can actually.
I think there's a really important point to be made here.
Yes,
we have the choice in life of being told what we're going to do. We're being told by some jumped up bureaucrat that you're going to do such and such. You're going to pay a £75 fine, or I'm not going to let you travel.
Correct.
Now, it's beholden on all of us to say, no, that is not acceptable. You will not speak to me in that way. And you can either be coerced and compliant, or you can say no. And I think it's increasingly the case that society is pretty much evenly split. We are being told by the technocrats and by the tech bros in particular, the 7 billionaires that dominate global business these days, that we are going to behave in certain ways, and those ways will be definitive default.
Yes.
And that is no longer acceptable. And I think people are going to have to stand up as individuals, not rely on politicians, but say enough is enough.
Yes.
But the great thing is that I think we are representative of a vast horde of people who have worked in technology for decades and see its inherent advantages for liberation and human freedom. And say, no, enough is enough. We're not gonna take this anymore.
I totally agree, and I think there's more and more coming in our direction and landing at that place, saying that I've had enough. I'm not putting up with this anymore. And it's actually a very simple act of courageous act in some cases, just to say, no, I'm not doing this. I can tell you, I've on occasion decided, instead of suffering through the indignity of having to go through an airport and all the horrendous amounts of checks and abuse you sometimes have to take just going through security, which is a constant source of conflict for me, because I just think they've totally overdone it. And they also treat people like crap, excuse me, when they have to check for whatever it is that they've checked for, whatever they think they have to check for. But by the way, they've never, ever captured a single criminal through those machines, to my knowledge, not one. And we still do this, right? But anyway, all that indignity, just to get, to not have to live with that, is just to hop in my car and drive across Europe, because at least there's some freedom in that, as opposed to...
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Because the other is I mean, it upsets me a huge amount to have to suffer through all of this. And you even, in some countries, you still have to take off your shoes. Why have they not invented a machine that can check your shoes, right? Without you having to take them off.
Absolutely.
I know these are these small things, but it's part of a bigger picture, is that you will comply, you will do as you're told. If you have to fly, you will jump through these hoops, and you will be treated like crap, which is basically what they do when you have to go through security. And of course, the argument is, we have to keep everybody secure. But have you captured a single criminal with your machines? One. Show me one case. Not one. Yes, but it's, that's why we do it, so that we don't have to. I'm not sure that I buy all of that stuff. They haven't even once considered, how can we make it less of a hassle? How can we make it more convenient? Should we stop bothering people every time they fly? Maybe bothering them just a little less, right? But they don't. It's not a thing for them. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, but it's just...
No, for me, it's a wee bit like all of these false flag terrorist events that are happening, probably including 9/11. So they say, that, there's all these terrorists about, and actually it's us. It's not actually the terrorists. It's really us. But it's a bit like that at airport security. I mean, there were many years ago when I lived in the United States at the time. I think we had the shoe bomber, the so-called
the shoe bomber, yeah.
And of course that was the excuse to implement all of these checks at airport security. But of course, there's a massive industry associated with that. And many of these companies are the same companies that manufacture arms and military surveillance equipment as well. So there's a massive industry. So, obviously, if they create a kind of false flag terrorist attack, then there's a motivation for the airports to implement all of this wonderful technology. And at around about that time, when there was a shoe bomber and they were implementing the technology, some guy at airport security, I think it was in New Jersey or somewhere, Newark, no doubt, in a flippant kind of jokey way, mentioned to the airport security staff that he had a bomb in his bag, and he was arrested. I remember at the time there was a great social media meme about it. And if that's the thing, if people's authority, and there's a lot of tabard wearing jumped up authoritarians in airports and all those types of places, if those people's authority is challenged, oh my goodness, just wait to see what happens to you.
Oh God, yeah. They are small authoritarians, the people that run those places. They are attracted to places like that because they get an undue amount of power having, checking people. And if you like that sort of thing, that's where you go, right?
Yeah.
Even though you have maybe not a lot of education or whatever. I wanted to bring up one other thing and hear your comments to this. So this is the CBDCs thing, and this is obviously a big topic and probably it's a topic for another show, but I wanted you to voice your opinion on CBDCs. I know there's a lot of central banks, whatever, including in Europe, working on this. I mean, a lot of people are scared of it because of all these restrictions that they put on your spending and whatever, like social credit scores, et cetera, and all of that. And I think that's common knowledge that people are concerned. I'm also a little bit concerned, not very concerned though, and I'll tell you after, but why that is. But what's your view on this whole CBDC discussion?
I think CBDCs is another false flag scenario, because this idea has been floated off that they're going to create central bank digital currencies. Of course, the banks already act in cahoots with central banks. and are bailed out by central banks when needed. So they don't. They do need to implement some means of programmability. So in other words, a bit like your electric buses, that they have kill switches. So the fungibility of cash is scrapped. And there's an excellent article, by the way, on my website about this issue of how digital currencies rob individuals of the right to, pay, use cash anonymously to engage in transactions. Yeah, sure. And of course, the recipient of cash is able to use that cash in exactly the same way. It's fungible. It is transferred from one person to another and is undiminished and doesn't have any sort of conditions attached or terms and conditions associated with it. Whereas CBDCs, obviously a myriad of terms and conditions, and the government can switch off the fungibility when they choose. However, I think that it's much more likely that we'll see the private sector provide de facto central bank digital currencies in the United States with dollar stable coins. Yes. Yeah, so they will be switched off on a whim. Tether has already announced, that it has a special working relationship with the federal authorities in terms of stopping, say, illicit trade in drugs or dodgy goods. Yes. Obviously ignoring the fact that most of the trade in dodgy goods and services are undertaken by central governments. So I think it's highly unlikely that this policy will be implemented in the way it's suggested. And there's a lot of fear and propaganda around CBDCs, which to me feels a bit like controlled opposition.
Yeah, I can totally see that, and I think they're getting all their ducks in a row in the U.S. to do this. And there's that law that was passed. What was it called? I forget now. That enables that in terms of stable coins and so on. So I agree with that. I think the reason I personally don't believe that CBDCs is a threat to anyone is because it is still a fiat currency, and right now we are going through, in my view, the death of fiat currencies, not just the dollar, but every other fiat currency, because they're pretty much all linked to the dollar, will also, unfortunately, relatively soon be worth nothing. This is sadly what I believe. I think the dollar has lost 98% of its value since 1913, and it's rapidly deteriorating to zero. And we know this through the inflation numbers. By the way, the U.S. inflation numbers are not real. The CPI and all of these things. The real inflation is something completely different. And we can also see, so a CBDC is not going to change any of that. It's going to make a bad currency digital, but it's still a terrible fiat currency, which is really not going to do anything except to keep deteriorating in value. And one of the big reasons why I think it's obvious that this is happening, and I wanted to bring up this chart to show people what has happened. For example, so it's silver to the left and gold to the right. So gold has gone up threefold over the past 5 years. The value of gold denominated in US dollars, and this is a beginnings of a parabolic curve, as you can see. And if you I did this a few times actually for silver. If you try to plot a parabolic curve that fits this chart, and you can ask Grok or ChatGPT or something like that to do that, and it says the fit is like 99%. I mean, the accuracy of a parabolic curve computed to match this data is 99% correct. So this is 99%, a 99% precise parabolic curve, and even more so, it's even steeper with silver. And the reason for this is that fiat currencies, here specifically the dollar in this case, are accelerating their own demise through government printing and all of that. So the reason why I don't believe in CBDCs is it's not a replacement for this. It's just a continuation of the same thing. That you may convert your dollar to a digital dollar, but it's still a dollar, and it'll still go. The value of it will still go to zero. I hate to be the harbinger of bad news, but this is really where we're headed. And I think this debasement trade is now a thing, and I'm thankfully I recognize this early, and I'm a big investor in precious metals, so I'm good. I recommend people look into it because you may not want to have a lot of your money, in fiat currencies anymore. You may want to look into hard assets like gold or real estate or silver or something like that. But this is why I'm not worried about it, because it's not going to solve anything. It'll still go into inflation, and it won't help anyone. And in fact, it's probably a good thing in the end that we have to go through this, because it'll bring a lot of institutions that are oppressive. They will come crashing down eventually, simply because the central bank scheme of ostensibly putting in 2% of inflation every year, or allowing that, is breaking down, because that's running out of control. I mean, what are your views on this, Jeff? Do you agree with me on this?
Yeah, I would just put a caveat in that most gold and silver that's being traded is obviously digital.
Yes, and it can be.
Yeah, and now, I take your point that it's probably a good idea for people to have in their portfolio physical gold and silver.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, that's just not an option, obviously. And there's also the issue of bid-offer spread. The people the bullion companies make a killing from this type of market, in that their buy price and their sell price are very, very different. And so therefore the trading of physical silver and physical gold precludes a lot of people getting involved. It's just not, and that for that 80% of society that I was mentioning earlier that are living hand to mouth, that maybe maxed out their credit cards, they have no ability to get involved in this market. Possibly they might buy some tokens. They might buy some, gold or silver tokens, or even they might be convinced that there might be an opportunity for them to get involved through their 401k. Yeah, and that's the method by which people are getting involved in this market, which smells very much like the Bitcoin market. Now, it may be, I think there is an argument that it may be that silver, and particularly silver, because of its unit value, is still relatively low compared to gold. It may be that we see a situation in the future where silver becomes the global currency, and that everything is pegged to silver and is pegged to holdings of silver. And that could include holdings of physical silver to replace current cash. Of course, the big question is that the world needs to transact. Goods and services need to be purchased and sold. Yes. And we need something to be able to do that in. The question is whether it's going to be dollars or silver. Probably it's going to be some version of silver. And Warren Buffett, for example, has put a lot of his wealth into currency. So he's sort of hedging against the stock market by buying currency, buying fiat. So he's saying, no, I think that there's enough momentum in the dollar market for me to. And of course, the other consequence might be, if we are going to see, and if the consumer demand is being driven primarily by that top 10% of society that has made money through property wealth, maybe a little bit of metals wealth, and also the stock market, and the stock market is still buoyant. If those markets slump, we're going to go into a period of vast deflation. So prices will slump right across every category. Yeah, and there will be essentially, too much goods chasing too little money, and we may see the rise of the dollar for reasons that we hadn't fully comprehended, or indeed the rise of silver. I interviewed Nick Hudson recently. I know that he was recently interviewed on Geopolitics and Empire, and the message that he's continuing to amplify is the idea that everything is about technocratic, centralized control, and that this has been decades, maybe more than 100 years in the planning. And the move towards the technocratic elite is beginning to slightly unravel. I think people are seeing through it, and they're seeing through the loss of democracy and the loss of all political institutions and political parties, all of whom are captured and owned.
Yes.
And therefore, it falls on us to say, well, no, we need to start thinking of different paradigms. We need to start thinking about different ways of living and getting off grid.
Yes.
And if that's about buying silver or whatever it might be,
yes,
it's a conversation that needs to be had.
yes,
And technologists, people who are developing the software and the services and the tools and the products, need to get on board and start supporting the individual again,
totally,
rather than supporting so-called governments.
Totally agree. And there's actually a real business opportunity there. There really is. I mean, if I were able to choose products from a company that I know support and believe in the same things that I do in terms of individual freedom, of course I would do it. Of course. And I think maybe that has yet to really happen. There's a few things out there, but this is a fertile market. There's a lot of people that now think like us. There really are, more than most people, certainly more than the politicians are willing to admit. Right?
Yeah. I know this probably leaves you cold a little bit, UK politics.
No, I follow it. I follow
it
it a lot. I do.
But it does indicate a wider malaise in the Uni Party, because the Uni Party has nowhere to go in aligning itself with those doctrinal, authoritarian policy positions of the COVID era. They have nowhere to go. They have nowhere to develop an argument which suits the needs of people who value individual sovereignty and freedom.
Yes.
And, you know, all of the dead wood of the Conservative Party is now moving to the dead wood of the Reform Party in the United Kingdom. Yeah. Left, right is dead. Left, right no longer exists. Democracy no longer exists. There are no longer any political saviors. It rests on us. And good thing is, Klaus, at least I think people who went through the great years, the years where technology resulted in the biggest increases in wealth and that we have ever seen, that we went through those years and we saw the value of technology, we saw the value of networking and communications and digital technologies, and also wonderful engineering prowess.
Sure.
We went through that period and we can see the virtue that's inherent within it. It's not what the technocrats tell us technology is. That's not what it's about. It's not about a surveillance state. No. It's not about any of these things. It's about individual human sovereignty.